Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 o'clock. Thank you for joining us on today's work session. I'm going to call the work session into order in a moment. I want to remind everyone that mute can be a wonderful thing when we're not speaking, but also recognizing that if one is participating in the conversation, it does take a few seconds if one comes off mute. So appreciate everyone's attention to that. With that then, as we convene this work session and I call to order, I will call roll for board members. And I'll start Miss Maya.
Hi, everyone. I'm here.
Graduate. Mr. Hendricks.
Yes, here.
Miss McGrath.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Saar.
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Narini.
Present.
Dr. Thor.
Present.
Ms. Nguyen.
Present.
And with that, we have a quorum and all board members are present for this. The conversation today will center around enrollment update, and we will then have another session of the budget regarding tuition reduction options and any other comments. We will have the opportunity to meet until 5:30, at which point we will then adjourn for an intermission and regroup at 6:30. So with that, for an enrollment update, Dr. Gonzalez, I'm turning this over to you.
Thank you, President Sullivan, members of the board. Good afternoon. It's almost evening. I'll still say good afternoon. We thank you for this opportunity to come before you virtually and talk about enrollment and also talk about some potential discounted tuition models. Our entire approach behind this has been that the community college mission is to serve the public need and there's public purpose in being able to increase access and to also promote continuing education and completion of education. And a mechanism in doing that could be a tuition reduction model. And so at the CEC level, we've been engaged in this conversation for at least 3 or 4 weeks off and on, but we've gotten pretty serious about it over the last couple weeks. And so the request at last week's work session was timely when some members of the board were wanting to explore further some discounted tuition models. And so we have that presentation set for you here today. I'm going to be asking Dr. Jim Moore, our Chief Operating Officer, and Gary Yaquinto, our Chief Financial Officer, to facilitate that conversation. I also have Dr. Olson, who is filling in for Dr. Paul Dale, president of Paradise Valley. Dr. Olson is president of South Mountain Community College, and Dr. Dale, as you may all know, serves as the chair of the President's Council. So some of this work early on went into the President's Council to create and to work up the various models you're going to hear about, and by doing that, then they were able to work with folks at their campuses to do the same. With that said, our weekly enrollment update is that for the summer session that we are currently in, FTSE ended up being down 8.3%, and for the fall semester, 14 weeks out from the start of the fall semester, we're down 27%. Of course, one of the benefits of a discounted tuition model could also entice a number of people to reconsider going to college, and this could serve as a mechanism as well to increase that enrollment. However, serving the public good is our primary purpose in that. With that said, I want to turn this over to, if you will allow me to turn this over to Dr. Moore and Gary Yaquinto to take it from here. I believe they have a PowerPoint that is up and ready to roll.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. And then one other piece of information, would everyone please introduce themselves with their name and title as they speak, please? Thank you. So take it away.
Board President Sullivan, board members, Chancellor, colleagues, this is Jim Moore. I'm the interim Chief Operating Officer. We've been working on this project for, as the Chancellor indicated, for several weeks. And we did arrive at a set of assumptions to sort of hold that constant so that we could look at the different options through the same lens. Gary worked very closely with our budgeting office and institutional research to pull numbers. And so with that, I'd like him to at least start with what our assumptions are, kind of move through the slides, and then we'll field questions and have discussion as soon as the completion of that.
Thank you, Jim. President Sullivan, board members, I'm Gary Yaquinto, Chief Financial Officer for the district. Good afternoon. President Sullivan, board members, as you instructed last week, staff put together cost estimates for several options for reducing tuition, essentially giving tuition discounts. And this presentation describes that analysis. And I'd like to move quickly, if we could, to the second slide, which is our agenda. And first on the agenda is a list of assumptions that went into the analysis. And then next we go through the tuition discount options. The 8 options that are listed in the agenda were those identified by board members in last week's meeting, and also includes an idea from the Counselor's Executive Council as well. And I'd like to note at this point that we only looked at the cost estimates and tuition reduction as it relates to the general fund. Next on the agenda is a matrix that we developed to evaluate the 8 options based on a common set of evaluation criteria. And then finally, before I leave this slide, I inadvertently left this item off the agenda, but it is the last slide, and it is a slide on the effect of tuition reductions on the expenditure limit. So if we go back to assumptions, if we move back one slide, thank you. So the first assumption is that we left enrollment flat from last fall semester to fall 2020. So we had a consistent measuring stick, if you will. Next, the data show that out-of-state students take more credit hours than residential students, and that affects the weighting of the costs among student groups, so that the cost for out-of-state students, for example, is weighted slightly more because they take more credit hours. We used earned credits to calculate the impacts. We included dual enrollment courses. The analysis does not include fees like registration fees. The estimates do not include clock hour classes, adult basic ed, or GED courses. And again, we're only looking at impacts on the general fund. So if we can move to the next slide, please. This slide is a summary of the various options that we examined and that we provided cost estimates for. And I'd like to go through the costs, through the options quickly and the cost estimates. Options 1A and 1B are similar. They're variations of each other. Option 1A is free tuition for all students. That would that costed out at somewhere between $70.2 million to $70.9 million. Option 1B is the one that Mr. Saar had mentioned, and it is free tuition for Arizona residents. And the cost of that, as we estimate it, is between $60.6 million to $61.2 million. Next is a reduction of tuition by $70 million. I believe that this was proposed by Mrs. McGrath. And of course, the cost estimate for that is $70 million. The next option is again from Mrs. McGrath, and it's to reduce the cost per credit hour from $85 to $50. And the cost estimate is $24.9 million to $25.2 million. Next, option 4, up to 3 credit hours, no cost. This was an option that Dr. Narini had proposed. And the cost estimate for this ranges between $22.2 million and $29.3 million, depending on how you calculate the 3 credit hours. Option 5, institutional scholarship set aside. This is from Dr. Thor, and we plugged a range between $15 million to $20 million in an institutional scholarship set aside. And then 6A and 6B come from the CEC. And 6A is a combination of a 50% reduction in the credit hour costs and a flat rate full-time for over 12 credit hours. And the range for this option is $36.7 million to $37.1 million. And then 6B is a variation of that. Rather than a 50% reduction, we looked at a 25% reduction in credit hour cost, again with a flat rate full-time over 12 credit hours. And the cost there is estimated $19.9 million to $20.1 million. So I'd like to stop at this point, President Sullivan, if I could, to see if there are any questions on any of the options that we might be able to address.
Certainly. Board members, we've done this 2 ways. One, making it kind of an open-ended, anyone jump in, gets a little more awkward. Or B, I can call you one by one for any comments and questions. Which way do you prefer for this? Don't all speak at once. Yes.
Are we trying to decide what we would do, or can we start asking questions?
Now I want to know, do you want me to call on you or do you want to just have an open-ended?
That's your choice.
What you've done in the past has worked well.
Okay, then what I'm going to do is call you one by one. So Ms. Nguyen, I'll start with you.
So Mr. Yaquinto, I'm looking at this. If I take option 1A and 1B and I divide free tuition for all students by free tuition for Arizona residents, am I right in assuming that 85% of our students, or about 86%, are in state and about 15% are out of state?
Actually, I have those numbers. It's a little bit different than that. When you look at head count, Maricopa County residents comprise about 92.6% of our head count. In-state, out of county, about 3.2%, out of state, 4.2%. So when we do by weighted credit hours, though, there's a little bit higher weight that then is given to the out of state because they take more credits.
And then just one other question. The 6A and 6B, has anyone considered that we do 6A for fall and see what our enrollment rate is, and then do 6B for spring?
I think, yeah, and President Sullivan, Ms. Nguyen, I think that any kind of arrangement like that would certainly work. I think that the only ones that probably wouldn't work are 1A, 1B, and 2, because we would essentially exhaust our general fund reserve. But 6A, 6B, probably could be done for both semesters.
I guess what I'm saying is do 6A for one semester and 6B for the second semester, because I think that the most critical time is the fall semester. So giving them half off for fall semester, which hopefully will increase enrollment and give a tuition break. And then depending on if that's successful, then offer a 25% discount for the following semester. So I'm kind of creating a hybrid, but it's just a suggestion. That's all my question.
I think, and President Sullivan, Mr. Nguyen, I think that is certainly something that is doable and could be considered. And I'm not sure that any of us have really gotten to the point of trying to combine these things together into two semesters.
Thank you, Mr. Quinto. Dana, you spoke up. Do you have comments and questions?
I just want to thank everybody for working on this. It's well done. I like the numbers. I'm still a 1A person. I think it's time to be bold, not tentative. But I appreciate all the options that are out here and our discussion with those. But we're in a position when you're at 27% down on the fall that I don't think it's sustainable as an organization if we continue that path. So my point is I want to commend Mr. Quinto and all those that have been involved in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saar. Mr. Hendricks.
On number 5, can you help me understand what that is?
Yeah, there was a recommendation, I believe, from Dr. Thor, rather than looking at discounts on tuition and reducing the cost of the per credit hour cost, that another approach would be to provide some additional money for institutional scholarships. And so we essentially picked a range that we thought might make sense of between $15 million to $20 million, and to give you a sense for what that could generate if those awards were made at $15 million, it would cover 176,000 credit hours, or about 59,000 3-hour classes for students that need assistance, this kind of assistance. At $20 million, we're looking at about 235,000 credit hours and 78,000 3-hour classes that could be offered to students that, again, need this kind of assistance.
How would that be administered? How would we do that?
Well, and that is something that we'd have to look at. It would require some additional work to determine exactly how it ought to be implemented. But I think the first step is to determine the student population that would be served by these grants, and I think the initial thought was to look at those that are in greatest need.
So if we went with 5, our next step would be to set some sort of guidelines. I mean, would it be creating a whole new department to utilize this?
And Ms. Sullivan, Mr. Hendricks, no, I don't believe so. I think that we would implement it through our financial assistance department.
Okay. On all of these, I guess 1A for one, do any of these options provide anything toward DACA students?
I don't believe that no, I don't think that would be the case. I think that there is a restriction against providing free tuition to DACA students. Certainly would want to check with the legal department on that, Ms. Cooper, but I don't believe that we could do 1A or 1B and include DACA students.
So if I'm just trying to think out loud. If we did 1A or 1B or even 3, how would DACA students be treated? Would we say we have one rate for, I don't even know what you would call it. I guess we wouldn't call it in-state anymore. What would we have one rate for DACA students and one rate for everybody, or free for everybody else? I mean, that doesn't seem.
I think it'd be DACA students and international students be in a separate group.
So the free tuition to all students wouldn't include international students either then?
I don't think so, no.
Because the second one says Arizona residents, so I was thinking the first one would be everybody, and the second would be just residents.
Yeah, I apologize for the nomenclature there, but they're based on the law, we wouldn't be able to offer to all students, but almost all students.
So I'm assuming 1A would include international students, that the only ones excluded would be DACA students, then, is that right?
No, I think that 1A would exclude international students as well.
Okay, so when they came up with the number and the cost, did they include international students?
No.
They did not, okay.
No.
I guess my comments on the free options, I haven't personally found free options work well, and I've funded education for a significant number of students. And my experience has been over the years that when I'm paying for all of it, they drop an awful lot of classes. And when I change the process to they pay a portion of it, even if they're not paying a big portion, they tend to complete their classes when they have some skin in the game. So I'm a bigger supporter of them having something in it, even if it's not a big amount. That said, I'm probably a bigger advocate of 6A and 6B, possibly 5.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Further comments or questions from you?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Thor.
Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. I want to offer a different take on Mrs. Wynn's suggestion. And that would be that we do a 50% reduction in tuition for the fall, and then provide an incentive for those students to register in the spring. So in other words, it'd be a 50% reduction in the fall, and if you re-register in the spring, it would be a 25% reduction. Because to say it's 50% in the fall, and then going to be 25% in the spring, some students might still choose to stay out the fall knowing they're going to get the 25% reduction in the spring. But if you've also got to attend in the fall to benefit in the spring, it provides some incentive for them to do so. I also, like Mr. Hendricks, am concerned about a totally free tuition. And that's also based on my experience. My first presidency at West Los Angeles College was during the time that California was moving from being tuition free to having, really a very modest tuition. I think it was just like $50 the entire semester. The LA district fought even that, thinking that we were going to lose large numbers of students. What we found instead was that when it was free, students registered for more courses than they ever intended to complete. In other words, they were shopping. And so they'd wait until after the semester started to find out what classes they liked or what instructors they liked and so on, and then dropped the classes that they didn't. Once they had to start putting even a small amount of money out, we saw a definite change in that behavior, and students were enrolling in the number of courses that they really intended to take, and students were less apt to drop during the semester because, as Mr. Hendricks said, they did have skin in the game. So I'm inclined towards a combination of 6A and 6B.
Thank you.
That's it.
Mrs. McGrath.
Yes. I'm wondering, the reason we're doing this is to increase enrollment because we have this huge enrollment drop. Has any of this been done before? Are there any previous experiences at other institutions where they have tried this approach, and has it been successful in drawing new students and retaining old students? And also, I'm wondering if everyone got the same email that I did about the costs of books. And from what I can gather, in many cases, the cost of books is equal to the cost of tuition. And I'm wondering if we should perhaps do a combination here with reducing book costs along with reducing tuition. I agree with Mr. Hendricks and Dr. Thor that if you don't have any skin in the game, you just blow it off and have a good time playing enrollment bingo. And so I really am opposed to free tuition, even close to that. But I'm wondering, has anyone ever studied this as to what incentivizes students to come in? Did they ever, has it been investigated when we've had a huge downturn in the economy before as to what works? And with the cost of books so high, has that been tried? And I don't expect an instant answer, but perhaps we aren't deciding this today from what I can gather. So perhaps we could have a report on whether any of this is past history.
Those are good comments, Mrs. McGrath. Dr. Gonzalez, do you have any reaction just off the top of your head to that, her comments, please?
Yes, President Sullivan, Mrs. McGrath, a couple of board members have commented on and used the skin in the game metaphor. Research indicates that when students do have some investment into their education, as nominal as it might be, that they're less likely to drop those courses and less likely to fail, knowing that they've got something of great value to them in that process. So the research supports that. What we're doing in terms of reduction models, we do see other institutions across the country that are doing this now for summer session and already have advertised, similar models for the upcoming fall. I just don't know that we've seen this in the past that would demonstrate that, whether it's been a successful or failed venture in that. But I'm not saying that we're doing this just because everybody else is doing it. We're doing this because our community is in great economic need, and there's a number of people that need to get trained up very quickly and back out into the workforce with a greater skill set than what they had prior to the pandemic. But we can provide, we can certainly explore and attempt to provide some information and see if there's any research out there. But I can tell you this: we'll find research that says that the absolute free model is one that has not been most productive.
And do you have any comment about the book piece? Those would be two separate pieces, would they not?
Yes, they would be. The book piece would be one that would be more difficult to put an immediate reduction in cost. I mean, perhaps a combination of a 6A, 6B, and if there was some institutional scholarship set aside, those scholarships could be set up specifically to cover all or a portion of textbook costs. I would remind everybody that in 2013, Maricopa engaged in a project called Maricopa Millions, where as a district, they committed themselves to going out for open educational resources, which means that professors would identify resources that are available online and free to students and package that as a part of their academic learning experience instead of purchasing a textbook. And over the last 4 or 5 years, Maricopa District has saved students between $11 and $12 million by removing those textbook costs. Now, we're gonna ramp up that conversation here very soon, especially in light of the pandemic and the economic situation that our students face, that looking for one more way to make college more affordable to them. So we plan to begin that conversation at our next CEC meeting as early as next Monday.
Thank you. Mrs. McGrath, do you have any other comments?
What I'm concerned about is there any studies that have indicated whether these procedures work. We're trying to get the students back in the classes, and I'm wondering if during the Great Depression of the 30s, if anything like this was tried. I know Amity Shlaes has written a book called The Forgotten Man, and it was about what happened to people during the big recession, depression, and I'm wondering if any statistics are available from that before. And I wasn't talking about 1A and 1B. I apologize if I misled anybody, but I definitely don't want free tuition because, as been stated, it does not work. And I'm just creating more work for our people by asking about the books and asking about if historically this has been done in the past. I know there are other schools doing it, but that isn't what I want to know. I want to know what is the most successful plan to move forward on. And I'm wondering if anybody's ever done any studies upon how we move forward and draw more students. And thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McGrath. Dr. Narini.
Thank you. Boy, everybody gave me quite a bit to think about. One of the places that we could probably start looking for some of that research is USC's Rossier College or School of Education. They have the Center for Enrollment Research and Policy and Practice. They offer certificates and masters in enrollment management. And I'd like to kind of follow up with what Mr. McGrath was asking is, what is our goal? Right, our goal is to increase enrollment. I think this downturn in enrollment, what we're facing right now, is can be seen as either like as a woe is me moment, or we can look at it as a way to as an opportunity. I think all these ideas are great, but we're missing out on a number of things. I mean, enrollment management. Now I'm talking from my 40 years of experience working with students, enrolling students, doing this kind of work. There's much more to enrollment management than just what tuition is charged. We need to bring in folks. Admissions is one part. Like, if we could have all this, the best program in the world, but if that information is not getting to the students or getting to the clients that we intend to get it to, then it doesn't do us any good. So we're forgetting about the marketing piece of it. We're forgetting about the financial aid piece of it. How does financial aid work in this? How does the FAFSA work in this? How does the Pell Grant work into this? When we talk about DACA students as well, I think they can be included, because the way the law is written now is that these students cannot have any opportunity that isn't available to any other U.S. citizen. So if we look at 1A for all students, if we're offering this to all other U.S. citizen, DACA students would be eligible for it. We have to look at this. I would rather take this money and invest it in a comprehensive enrollment management program where we include admissions, where we include financial aid, where we include academic advising, where we include marketing, so that it's not just this one-time deal that we're going to fill up the classes for next semester, but we're planning to fill up the classes for the next 10 years by having a strong enrollment management program that we invest in. That we can take this money and invest in a strong enrollment management program that will identify the needs. Like, who are the students we're looking for? Which students are we going to target with this? We can target those students who were enrolled last semester but didn't enroll this semester. That should be our first target. We can start targeting those students who were enrolled in the past 3 years but aren't enrolled now. Those students we can bring back. We can start looking at students who have been out of the workforce for multiple years, or out of the college for multiple years, and bring them back. And then we can start on the whole new contacts that we're doing with our advertising campaign, and start looking at those areas that are hardest hit. So I'm all for, when Obama said, we want free tuition, I'm all for free tuition, but not in this situation. What we have to do is look at the students. You're right. They need the skin in the game. Scholarships are incentives to the students, right? We can give scholarships and we can have the cost to do whatever, but we have to have the scholarships to incentivize the students. We look at the way businesses do their tuition when they work with students. It's a tuition reimbursement where they have the students put the skin in the game. They get a certain GPA. They make their satisfactory academic progress. Then then they get reimbursed for that tuition. There's all sorts of models that are out there, but I think if we jump into this too quickly and we spend this money too fast, and we don't look at the way our enrollment is managed in the long run, we're going to be in this situation year after year after year.
Mr. Narini, I have a question for Dr. Narini, sorry. This is Marie. I have a question for you. Would you see a short-term solution while folks are working on a longer-term investment strategy, or are you all in with one or the other?
No, I think whatever one we select, we have to bring in all the other folks that are involved. Marketing needs to be a big part of this because we need to market this to the students that we're targeting. We need financial aid in this because how is it if we know that the Pell Grant, students are eligible for over $6,000, $6,095 for the Pell Grant if they qualify. Are we going to forego that money if we offer discounted tuition or free tuition? This is money that the federal government is giving the students to pay for these sort of things. There's a lot of these things that need to be packaged together. We can't just say, we're going to do, X, Y, or Z and expect all the world to know that and come flocking in without the marketing, without the academic advisors that are going to be there to work with that student so they sign up for the right class so that that class means something the spring semester and the fall semester and the next spring semester. But whatever we do, we need to make sure that we have the experts at the table to do this. Like I said, the admissions, the financial aid, the academic advising, the transfer students, the workforce people, they all need to be part of this. And we can't just throw out, pick one of these and think it's just going to be the magic bullet. Again, the cost of tuition is only one piece of enrollment management.
Thank you. Dr. Gonzalez and Mr. Iaquinto, in the costs, were you looking at a mathematical equation that just addressed the reduced tuition models? And did you look at the budgetary impact to additional areas such as the cost of doing business in other arenas mentioned by Dr. Narini?
And
President Sullivan and Dr. Narini, I'll allow Mr. Iaquinto to answer that question, and then I'll address some of the other things that Dr. Narini raised after that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. And thank you, Dr. Narini, for your observations. Lots of good stuff there. And to address your question, Mrs. Sullivan, no, we did not look at these other areas and additional costs that might be incurred. We just simply calculated based on the options, what the effect on the general fund would be.
Okay, thank you.
President Sullivan, if I may weigh in.
Yes, please.
So Dr. Narini brings up some excellent points, and certainly, the district and our individual colleges have strategic enrollment plans. And so what you're seeing here before you is absent of all of that, because that talks about the the operationalizing of these models. And so clearly there would need to be some marketing behind this, some strategic communication around this, and longer term plans. He's absolutely right. This is more of a shot in the arm for the upcoming academic year. But the longer term fix is one that deserves great attention, and we're engaged in those conversations as well. Those are things that we haven't ignored or forgot about, but you're just seeing some simple models to address the tuition reduction. But we appreciate Dr. Narini's insight, and with his experience in education, it's very clear that he's got a solid understanding of the necessity behind a comprehensive strategic enrollment plan. And that's something that, over perhaps at an upcoming meeting over the next month or two, that's something that we can bring forward and reshare with the board if there's interest in seeing what we're doing comprehensively to address enrollment, not just by looking at a tuition model. So thank you, Dr. Narini, for raising those, and Mrs. Sullivan for me having an opportunity to respond.
Sure, thank you. We have another voice that's important to hear from. Ms. Maya, what is your point of view?
So as a student, of course, I think that free tuition is great. Like Dr. Narini said, I don't let my money go to waste. And of course, whatever I invest in, I want to make sure I finish. But also as a student sitting on the board, I am thinking about what is our business model? How are we going to proceed after this year? And what will happen to the services provided at the campus? How will this free tuition affect the students in other services like counseling, the free tutoring and stuff like that?
Dr. Gonzalez?
Yes, very good questions, very good concerns, of course, and our plan is to not reduce the level of services that our students are accustomed to receiving, even in light of a tuition discount. We continue to provide the quality service. In fact, always looking for ways to improve the service that we provide, whether that's in a face-to-face or this virtual environment that we currently find ourselves in.
Okay. Also, is the so for number 5, option number 5, is the institutional scholarship set aid, does it have to do anything with the honor scholarships?
And I can answer that question. Ms. Sullivan, Ms. Maya, no, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Maya, do you have any comments of a preferred model based on what you heard?
Like Dr. Thor said, I do think that 6A and 6B are my preferable option. Like Dr. Thor said, perhaps providing like a 50% off, and then if they re-register, give them like a 25% off. I think students do whatever money they invest in, they want to finish. Like I said, I am one of those students, but I also see that giving free tuition it's like they're getting free things and they're not going to take care of it unless they invest some money into it.
Thank you. Any other comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Your voice is important to this process. So my turn. When I reviewed all these, first of all, I wanted to support Mr. Saar in saying thank you for putting all of this together. We know it was a request that needed to happen quickly. I have really no questions. My observations were twofold. In reviewing the items, before we even get to the next slide, which I know will have some contribution to our comments, my reaction was also supporting some sort of 6A, 6B. I wasn't really clear at the time of where I landed in an absolute reduction. I do think in the short term, incentivizing individuals to participate with us in the college system beginning in the fall is a good idea. I do want to acknowledge as well, similar to what we want to have moving forward with compensation and other things, a lot of the ideas that we generate and work with in the system does require that backup research, but also requires the forethought of what does this investment really mean, which then calls for us to really be looking at comprehensive approaches and strategies, not for just today, but for today and tomorrow, longer term. So if we move forward with any one of these options, I think it's important, Dr. Gonzalez and Provost and others, to really be thinking of how do we put together a substantive enrollment management process to accompany all this. And again, maybe the pieces are already there, but and adding the research that Mrs. McGrath has mentioned could certainly reinforce and acknowledge new ways of doing business for us. So those were my comments. So are there any other comments from board members on this slide before we move to the next? If so, just speak up.
Ms. Sullivan, this is Dana.
Yes, Dana.
It's been great discussion, and I have an open mind, and I've changed my mind on this. I like Dr. Thor's comments on 5 and on 6A and B, especially when we try to look at sustainability of those students over the course of the whole year. My question, though, full-time is over 12 credits. You know, I look at our students who are most affected by this economy. Spending the time to take 12 credits is going to be a struggle for our students as they're trying to work more hours to keep their households going. I'm wondering if instead of 12 credits, we look at others, maybe as low as 6 credits. That's our average is 7, somewhere in that range anyway. And I get why 12 is there, but I think we need to look at maybe our average student in terms of credits taken. So, so thanks for the discussion, board members and others. This is good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sark. Dr. Gonzalez, I know full-time was considered the operating number. Was there consideration, or how can there be consideration given to those who are not attending full-time?
President Sullivan, Mr. Sar, that's a great question, and part of conversations that we did have, and the 12 credit hour was to take the student that was in the average credit hour taken each semester, and to encourage them to step up and increase the number of credit hours so that they can complete faster and get into the workforce faster. One of the things, and I may ask Provost Dr. Fisher to weigh in here in just a moment, but if we were to do a combination of 6A, 6B with the incentive that a student registering who was in the fall went on to the spring and received the reduction, we might actually see a decrease then in the 19.9 million to 20.1 million, just because the spring semester is not entirely comprised of the number of students who went from fall to spring. So we could actually see a reduction in 6B as a result of that incentive. With that said, I'll ask Dr. Fisher if she's available to offer some comment on Mr. Sar's question. And I too want to thank Mr. Sar for bringing this to the table and giving us a chance to discuss this in this forum. It's been very helpful.
Thank you.
Sar, Mr. Sar, Ms. Sullivan, Chancellor, members of the board. One of the things that we've talked about in terms of all of these options.
Excuse me, who is this speaking?
I'm sorry, this is Dr. Carla Fisher. I'm provost of the system.
Thank you. Go ahead.
One of the things that we've been talking about, and I think is really important, is if you look at the really successful scholarship kinds of operations in other states, they typically are last dollar scholarships. So even if we go to 6A for the fall, so 50% reduction in credit hour per cost, we'd want to do that after we encourage students to apply for their FAFSA. I think it was mentioned earlier on the call, if we reduce our cost overall, that can actually reduce the amount of money that a student can get. And that doesn't mean just for their tuition and fees, that could mean for their cost of living as well. So we don't want to do that. We want to do that on the back end after they've applied for the FAFSA. There will always be students who won't want to do that for a variety of reasons, and we'll need to write policy to help or administrative guidelines to help them achieve the same reduction or support that we're trying to offer other students. But if we do it as that back end or last dollar in scholarship, we could really help both those that are part-time and with the flat rate full-time, those that are over 12. Our average student takes 7.5 credit hours, so it's more than part-time, but less than full-time. If we can encourage them to go full-time, and Mr. Sar, I completely understand your point that they have lives and they have other challenges, but if we can help them with their academic momentum, we can help them get finished more quickly. So I hope those are helpful comments. I would also say, Mr. Narini, all of what you said is absolutely correct. We do need to look at financial aid portion of this, our enrollment management. We've made some real strides in the last year in putting some different attention to enrollment management, and we would really be delighted to come back and share that with the board. What we were asked to do for this time was really to look at tuition reductions as that shot in the arm for our fall tuition and fall enrollment. Dr. Gonzalez, is there others that you need from me, or is that?
I think you hit it, Dr. Fisher. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez.
Thank you. Board members. Yeah, yes.
This is Dr. Narini. Yes, I agree with Dr. Fisher, and thank you for that. And again, this is why we need to include. This is why it needs to be a comprehensive approach, because we have to be careful with financial aid, because students only have X number of semesters that they can receive the Pell Grant. And when they do that, if we're not pushing them towards that 12 or 15 credits, they're going to spend all their Pell Grants at the community college, and so when they go to transfer, it's not going to be there. So we have to, do our due diligence for the students as well. And again, bringing financial aid into this so that we have a good understanding about what all this means, and then making sure that we do a good job of helping the students understand what this means to them and why it's important to take those 12 to 15 credits. I mean, 15 is the ideal to get them through in a reasonable amount of time so that we're not saddling them with debt down the road. So yes, with that, again, comprehensive pieces is really important.
So I'm not hearing that that's being ignored in the underneath piece of what we're looking at, though it is, to your point, over time to certainly be building that into all enrollment strategies and linked to tuition as well. Okay, so Mr. Yaquinto, I think
Mrs. Sullivan,
yes, please.
I'm sorry. This is Mrs. Nguyen. I love the conversation and thank you. And I agree and concur with Dr. Thor about the 25%. So I just wanted to go back to saying if you went in the fall, then you get that as an incentive to do the spring. So I wasn't not stating that. I want to just make that clear. The other thing, though, I don't want to step over is what Mr. Narini and what Provost Carla. Sorry, just her whole last name just went out of my head. Sorry, Carla. I believe that the process is critical, that we don't want to, in offering 50%, damage their ability for other funding or grants. So I think that needs to be done fairly quickly, that if we agree to this in some form, we need to know the direct impact as soon as possible. The other thing is how quickly can marketing, if we agree to something, how quickly can marketing get this out and we get a response or some kind of program where we give it a name or whatever we do with this if we agree to do this. Because getting people enrolled in the fall is our whole reason for doing this, to up our enrollment. So I would like to know those missing pieces. If we come to some kind of conclusion, how quickly would the other pieces move in, and how are we ready to launch once we come to a decision?
Thank you, Mrs. Nguyen. What I heard Dr. Gonzalez say is certainly once we give them direction which way we're going, then the ball is rolling in the operationalizing of all of these pieces, and we would be receiving a report as well as another session on what that looks like pretty quickly. Did I hear that correctly, Dr. Gonzalez?
Yes, President Sullivan, Mrs. Nguyen, that would be correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Nguyen, for your comments. So with that, I'm going to move us then back to Mr. Yaquinto, and I know you have more to present on impact of these decisions, though it looks like we're moving, I don't want to say to deliberate consensus, but moving to consideration of 6A, 6B in some format, but let's move on to the next slide. I believe that's your impact matrix.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. And if we could go to the next slide. Thank you, the colorful slide. And I think we can go through this quickly because I think we discussed most of the benefits and costs, the pros and the cons, or the impacts, but I'd like to quickly go through this. This slide represents our effort to evaluate the various options based on common criteria. And you can see the options are across the top and the criteria go down the side. You can see we've got a number of criteria: cost, commitment to public good, simplicity, ease of implementation, effect on other Arizona community colleges, potential to increase enrollment, effect on fund balance, financial flexibility, effect on credit ratings, and effect on student success. And the colors are indicative of how we have rated these. And by the way, the color scheme and the evaluation, we got input from the Chancellor's Executive Council on evaluating each of the options. And then they were finalized by a smaller subgroup that included Dr. Dale, Provost Fisher, COO Moore, and me. The red that you see in the slide represents a highly adverse impact. The gold or mustard color, likely adverse impact. The gray, neutral or unknown impact. And D, the green, represents lowest or positive impact. And you can see that 1A, 1B, and 2 have the most red, mainly because of the costs, but also the lack of skin in the game for students. And then you can see, if you go through the options to the right of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6A, and 6B, 6A and 6B in particular have the most green, which is the lowest or positive impact. And with that, there's much more that I could summarize, but it sounds like we've formed at least a direction at this point, so I'll stop with that.
Well, I don't know if that's exactly where we are, but looking at this matrix, Shelley, I'd like to go through the list again and just see if anyone has any particular questions. This time I'll start. Well, Mrs. Nguyen, do you have any questions after looking at this?
I'm sorry, who did you ask?
We have the impact matrix in front of us, and so I thought I would go down the list again. Certainly looking at this, is there anything that stands out to you in a question or a comment?
Well, it just, it looks pretty red at the beginning and it looks pretty green at the end. I think the only concern obviously is the cost to 6A, but in reference to Dana's original comments, when we were thinking about covering all the tuition, I do think we need to do something dramatic. And so the cost doesn't bother me as much on 6A. I don't like that that's where we're at, but I think that's where we're at. And I think that the rest of it is really, it still leaves 6A and 6B, I think, as we look at this, is one of our best choices.
Thank you. Mr. Saar.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think I worry less about cost at the numbers we're talking here than I do about the students that we serve. That also gives me, I'll worry about other districts and our credit rating just as soon as I feel comfortable that we're taking care of our students. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Maya.
I also agree with Mr. Saar and Mrs. Nguyen. 6A and 6B still look pretty good to me.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Narini.
Thank you. Yeah, I like all the green on 6A and 6B, and I think Dr. Fisher's made a excellent point about last dollar in and how we package this. If we go forward with this, how it's packaged so that so the students can maximize their financial aid, we can maximize our dollar. Because if we do that in doing the last dollar in, I think the final cost to this is going to be a lot lower than what we've got predicted on here, because it is last dollar in when we consider the students with other scholarships and other grant money coming in.
Thank you. Mrs. McGrath.
Thank you. I would really like to keep this low on the number of hours that are required to take, because we need to include the people who are taking what we used to call the manual arts courses, and they might not need as many credits to get themselves through. Also, we've not had a discussion on the effective tuition reduction on expenditure limit. I'd like to have an explanation and a discussion on that from Mr. Yaquinto, if possible.
Okay. Mr. Yaquinto, is that part of your next slide?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we'll finish this and then go back to that. Thank you. So that Mrs. McGrath, any other comment?
I think we need to move rapidly on this. It's been told us that other schools are doing this now, and so we're behind the 8 ball because we didn't think of it in time. But And I'd really like to have something in there for books, because books, as we know, equal tuition, and it's just ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hendricks.
On the effect on credit ratings, what did we use to come up with the ratings?
We're rated by the major credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and our credit rating right now, based on our fiscal condition, is at the highest grade. The fear is, and one of the things they look at is our fiscal flexibility to deal with emergencies and other uncertain events. And so they do look at our fund balances and our ability to meet those additional needs as they arise. And so as we spend down that general fund reserve, it has a negative effect. Again, it's a matter of magnitude, but it does have an effect on our credit ratings.
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand. Let's take 1A versus say 4, because we're not talking about a reserve. We're talking about excess capital that we're trying to spend because it's excess. We still have our reserves that we have for the purpose of keeping our credit ratings up. I mean, I guess let's take 1A. That one cost $70 million, I believe it was. Let's take 2, I think it was $50 million. Are we assuming that the rest of the $70 million is going to be added to the reserve account, so we're not going to spend it at all? Or, I mean, there must have been some kind of assumption. I mean, I assume we're going to spend all of the 70, so I don't think it's going to affect our credit rating on any of these.
And Mrs. Sullivan, Mr. Hendricks, there are two, I think we're mixing two accounts or two funds. We have a fiscal sustainability fund that is 10% of our revenues. And then we have a reserve in the general fund, money that has not been allocated or designated for expenditure. And that's what is about, well, it's a little bit higher since we reduced our expenditures by eliminating the COLA for FY21. But nevertheless, rating agencies are looking at that ability to make allocations out of that fund balance. And if there's nothing there, then that is indicative of increased risk and could affect our credit ratings.
I guess I don't think in the past we've had extra funds just sitting that weren't allocated anywhere. But let's look at commitment to public good. What is that based on? Is that based on a poll, or is that based on a group, or
again,
determine what public good is?
Well, and that's a good question. Thank you for the question. And it has several aspects to it. You know, part of it is cost. Part of it has to do with, you know, if we lose tuition, it could be, you know, as we discuss the other costs that might be associated with enrollment growth, it could mean that we would need to raise taxes to replace some of those. And that would be probably against the public good. And I'll speak about this in just a minute, the expenditure limit. While it could increase enrollment, you know, for example, 1A, 1B, and 2, it could negatively impact our expenditure carry forward, and therefore put us in jeopardy of exceeding that spending limit and be subject to penalties. Again, we talked about student completion, and your point about if there's no skin in the game, then we're likely to be enrolling students that many of whom don't complete or drop. And so that is a negative against those free type tuition proposals. And again, it would, again, I'm looking at 1A, 1B, and 2, you know, going forward with any of those proposals would exhaust our general fund reserve, that $70+ million that we keep talking about, and would not be scalable for the spring semester. We wouldn't be able to do it in the spring, even if we wanted to, going with one of those options. So those are the kinds of things that we considered as we work through various criteria and in evaluating each of the 8 options.
So did one person decide what the public good is, or is this a committee, or who defined this?
Well, it was a group effort, and CEC had some input, and then again, the smaller group of Dr. Paul Dale, Carla Fisher, the provost, and Dr. Jim Moore, our COO, and me, we basically sat down and tried to rationalize each of the criteria and how they would affect, how they would relate to each of the options. It wasn't one person, it was a number of individuals.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Thor.
Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. My preference is still 6A in the fall and 6B in the spring for continuing students. I too want to thank Dr. Narini for bringing up the issues around Pell Grants and Dr. Fisher's comments about last dollar in, that I do think that it's really important that what we're doing not hurt students receiving federal financial aid, but also that we do not end up having to put more resources into this than we have to if we do maximize other sources of aid.
Thank you, Dr. Thor. And I'm maintaining this position I had earlier. I did appreciate the matrix, though. It certainly allows us to see some of the impact in a different way rather than just in our imaginations, and the work that you put into doing that. Ease of implementation, certainly 6A, 6B probably has the likely adverse in the event. I'm trying to grapple with that, but I don't want to get into the weeds of the operational piece. But I expect if we choose 6A and 6B, combination thereof, that one of the points that would be addressed in a presentation to us would be how you're overcoming the adverse issues on those items.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. All right. Then let's move to your other slide. I think this is your last slide, which would answer directly Mrs. McGrath's interest to understand its reduction on the expenditure limit.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And first, before I walk through the slide, I'd like to provide a little bit of background on the expenditure limitation. And where you see EL, that's expenditure limit, and FTSE is FTSE, or full-time student equivalent. And the expenditure law was put into place by the legislature in 1980 to limit or restrict spending by government jurisdictions. And the formula restricts additional spending to increases. Well, there's a formula. It says additional spending is limited to full-time student equivalent plus inflation. And full-time student equivalent for us, I believe, is 15 hours per semester, or 30 hours over the course of an academic year. Over time, the legislature has made adjustments to the limit by excluding certain financial items. Tuition revenue, for example, is excluded from the limit. Over time, we have not reached our limit. We've been able to carry forward expenditure limit capacity because we haven't spent up to the limit in every year since 1980. Our estimated general fund carry forward balance going into FY21 is estimated about $145 million. So because tuition is excluded from the expenditure limit, as we reduce tuition and increase the proportion of property taxes used for spending versus tuition, we're running up against our expenditure limit, and we're forced to use our carry forward to make good on the limit so that we don't exceed it and incur penalties. And we all know that in recent years, our full-time student equivalent count has declined, but our expenditures have increased. You know, we've had expenditures, large expenditures in transformation and technology, for example, and the result of the combination, declining enrollment and increased expenditures, has been that we were forced to utilize our carry forward to avoid exceeding this expenditure limit. Just maintaining the current full-time student equivalent levels and counts and tuition revenue, we're projecting that we'll exceed the expenditure limit in FY24 or 25. And I know that our AC4 and Darcy are looking at ways to approach the legislature to change the expenditure law so that community colleges can move forward with investments that are necessary without incurring those penalties. Reducing tuition exacerbates the depletion of the carry forward, since tuition again falls outside of the expenditure limit. And as I mentioned, reduction in tuition revenue places greater dependence on property taxes, thus accelerating exhaustion of the carry forward even earlier in FY22 or FY23. And I just raised this issue so that we're all knowledgeable about what happens when we reduce tuition and its effect on expenditure limit. Now, having said that, to the extent that we're successful in any of these options in increasing enrollment, that is going to have an offsetting effect. So that's a positive effect if we increase enrollment. But nevertheless, we don't know how much enrollment would be increased. We're hoping, given the decreases we're seeing now for the fall, that we can at least maintain an even keel with respect to last year. But I just wanted to bring this forward to make sure that we're all understanding and knowledgeable about the fact that, you know, we're going to have this expenditure limit that we're going to have to address one way or another, and it may be sooner than we think.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments to Mr. Iaquinto's presentation? And Mrs. McGrath, you were curious about this. Do you have any comments?
No, thank you.
Did you? Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Ms. Sullivan, this is Dana.
Yes, Mr. Saar.
Mr. Iaquinto, we're currently 27.1% down on FTSE. If that is the case, I know there's a lag of maybe an entire year before it that would affect the actual expenditure limitation, but let's say that happens. Wouldn't that really exacerbate the problem way more than maybe a modest reduction in spending or revenue?
And Ms. Sullivan, Mr. Saar, yes, it would. And what we hope to avoid, yeah, I mean, it'd be great if tuition discounts and tuition reduction has a significant positive impact on full-time student FTSE. But what we hope to avoid is a double whammy. And I know that we're both tuition declining and FTSE declining. But I know that we're early in registration for fall enrollment. So, you know, the hope is that will pick up, and that if the board's decision is to move ahead with a tuition discount, that will have a good effect and a positive impact, and we hope very significant impact on FTSE.
Well,
Right.
Dana, again, right. Yeah, I get what you're saying, but keep in mind that we're checking enrollment on a week-to-week basis compared to a year ago. So if all things continue on, which we don't see any major indicators that would modify those numbers, we're hoping to reduce that 27.1% dramatically through the ideas we're talking about today. So I worry less about our effect on FTSE on whether or not we have a $50 million or $100 million. I'm worried more about the impact on the expenditure limitation by losing a quarter of our FTSE. So that just, you know, there's lots of unknowns, and I get that. And I guess you certainly have to make plans for worst case as well as normal case. But we're in a worst case situation now when it comes to enrollment. So I just want to make sure that we don't lose that in the process of discussion here.
And,
thank you.
And we won't. Scenario as it affects the expenditure limit. So it's not going to be a problem today. It could be a problem a year or two away, but for the time being, you know, we're looking at various scenarios on tuition reduction and FTSE changes. So, and again, the other thing to mention is that there is a movement afoot to make some changes to the law at the legislature. Some of that's stalled at this point, but you know, hopefully it'll come back to life sometime soon.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Yaquinto or Dr. Gonzalez? I don't see anyone's mute button going off. So so thank you very much, Mr. Yaquinto. Do you have any closing comments, Dr. Gonzalez? You said after the presentation, you might have some things to offer.
President Sullivan, members of the board, what I had said was that I'd have people that were available to offer comment, and they've all been called upon. So again, we thank you for engaging in this conversation with us. It's been very, very helpful, very productive, and I'm encouraged by it. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. So board, this is what I see as next steps. We're going to adjourn for an intermission. And there are two items I want to tell you that IT is asking us to pay attention to. One is rather than, after we adjourn the session, rather than disconnecting, if you can remain connected through this access, though putting your phones on mute, that would be preferred. And then the second thing is if you can come back to sound check about 6:15, IT would like to ensure that our connections are still in place. So the recommendation, do not disconnect, just put yourself on mute. And secondly, return to unmute about 6:15 so we can do a sound check. With that, then, where we will be heading at 6:30, as everyone knows, is a truth and taxation hearing. I have inquired if there have been any indicators of public comments, and I've gotten a note that so far there are no indicators that there will be any public comment. From that, then, we will move to a motion.
Sullivan?
Yes, go ahead. Who's this, please?
This is Jean McGrath. I have one more comment.
Oh, yes, please.
On 6A and 6B, there's a minimum number of class hours that these students have to take. I think that wouldn't work very well with trying to draw students in. I would like to have no minimum of the number of hours that students take. I think if they come in and take one class, it would be a benefit. Our whole purpose here is to draw more students in, not to draw more full-time students in. So I would really like to have 6A and 6B just cover whatever number of classes, however many hours each student takes, rather than saying they have to take a minimum.
Thank you. I think that's duly noted. Does anyone have any immediate response to that before I move on?
Ms. Sullivan, this is Gary again, and I do have a response. And Mrs. McGrath, the idea of 6A and 6B would be that the discount would apply to all credit hours being taken, but for those that are at 12 hours, they could take 15 or 18 for no additional cost, but everybody would get the discount.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quinto, for clarifying that. So to the next steps then, we will be having an action item on the budget. The current budget as presented has a carryover. We've been discussing tuition models. We certainly are not on the agenda to approve any particular agenda model, but by approving the budget, given that our direct conversation has been more information, it looks like there is a consensus around 6A, 6B modeled differently. 6A fall, 6B as an incentive to continuing students. Then what I think our next step on that would be is to have a work session or a presentation from the administration. What I don't know, given that it's an operational process, if we stipulate that we understand the budget exists, we know that there's money that would be spent out of that carryover for a 6A, 6B. Someone help me out here. Do we need to come back to a special meeting to specifically support the tuition movement? I know we can approve the budget as is with the stipulation that it moved to a different tuition model for fall and spring. I don't think we have to come together to absolutely approve a tuition model. Oh, no, maybe we do. We do. I'm thinking out loud in case you can't tell. Comments?
Mrs. Sullivan, this is Gary again. I think you would. I think you would have to approve specifically the discounts, but again, it would be at a later date.
Okay, so if we approve a budget that has the money in a carryover, for example, as it does now, we could then reconvene. Now, there's urgency certainly for us to move with this tuition model so that financial aid, marketing, and others can anticipate this for the recruitment of students and give direction to the leadership. So board members, when would you want to reconvene, given that we have to have a notice for us to take action on a tuition model? Comments? At this rate, I could call a special meeting for as early as Thursday. It would be for the sole purpose, depending on what we do with the budget, for the sole purpose of approving a tuition model.
I'd like to suggest that you don't do that and give them maybe till Monday or Tuesday of next week. Because then we pose some questions that may require a couple of days to get answers.
Who's speaking, please?
That was Mrs. Nguyen, Mrs. McGrath.
Sorry.
Dr. Gonzalez, what would be your preference?
I agree with Mrs. Nguyen's comment, President Sullivan. Having an extra day or two would be helpful on our part to put together some of the details that I would expect that you would want to see in the model that seems to combine a 6A, 6B sort of option.
Thank you. So let's do this, board. If everyone's amenable and no one's on vacation, and I put that in quotes, let's then plan to take action on the budget today with the recognition of, as it's currently presented, has the carryover to accommodate 6A and 6B. And then let's convene on Tuesday in a special meeting for us to receive or to review what you present, Dr. Gonzalez, and then we can take action on that. Does that meet with board's interest? You can offer yes, no's, maybes.
Dr. Narini, yes, that sounds good.
Thank you.
Ms. Dana,
That's
sounds
fine.
good.
Okay, I'm
It's
hearing
Linda.
fine. Anybody opposed? Let me do it that way. Anybody opposed? All right, being done, that will be our next step. So it's 5:24. Mr. Quinto, Dr. Gonzalez, all your team, thank you again for responding so quickly to the interests of the board on this idea. We are eager to move this forward and certainly have it available for consideration by students in their recruitment. We'll look forward to more details of the models. There is consensus right now around 6A, 6B. And with that, I'm going to put us on pause, everyone, until 6:30 when we will reconvene. And as IT suggests, please stay connected. Put your computers on mute, and I'll see you or talk to you at 6:30.